allow you to estimate power then by entering any of the 4 quantities that we need in some free ones. So again, it's fairly easy. You need your 3 numbers, and it's good. If you now write up a proposal for your PhD thesis, for instance, and it includes an experiment, it's going to look very convincing if you say, I did my power analysis, and I expect my entire sample that I need to be this big. It's going to look good for reviewers in journal articles. It's going to look good for funders of your research. It might be looking good for your professor who likes to see that you're working very thoroughly on these things. And it's not a big deal to do. Yeah? And it's very helpful also to plan the thing, because you actually know how many people you might have to ask.
What do we need to calculate the effect size? Mean of the groups?
No, you need these 4 things. You need your effect size, which could be any of those numbers between small and large. You know, you need to look at the theory and the literature and the prior studies and come up with a rough idea of whether at least you expect a strong effect or a weak effect. Yeah? And that's not going to be hard science. That's not going to be something you can calculate. That's something you need to argue for, basically, based on prior literature. So this is going to be from the table that we just looked at. And then you've got your significance level, P, 0.05, power, 0.80. And given these 3 things, you just chuck them into the formula, which I should have put on the slide, sorry. But again, there's a lot of programs out there that can do it, and that then allows you to calculate the number of people you need. Why not? What? Not clear?
How do we calculate this?
Yeah, I'm gonna. I put out the formula in the break before the tutorial. I really forgot to put it on the slide. Really. It's a very simple formula. It's, for quantities, x is size of the sample, and then you. I'm not sure exactly, but I'll take it out. And if you don't want to compute it yourself, you use one of the tools where you basically, it's Excel files where you enter 3 of the quantities and you get it. But I'll dig out the formula before we do it. The larger the effect size that we're looking at, the larger the power of the given sample size. So if sample size is the same, 40 people, the larger your effect size that you're looking at, of course, the more likely it is to actually find that effect. Larger the effect size, the smaller the sample size, you need to achieve the same power. So we can largely expect very strong effects. That means that we don't need as big of a sample, not that many people in the experimental group, to actually find our effects.
So is this could be used at the pilot stage as well?
Pilot stage as well, yeah.
So that you get an idea.
Yeah. I mean, if you do a pilot with very few studies, very few participants only, and you don't find anything, you can at least, you might find a tendency in your data, but it's not significant. So this would allow you at least to say, well, I'm still pretty confident about my pilot results because I know that I only had a few people and the power was this. And you can do this in Stata and R. Just Google for scripts of power estimation, and there's a lot to find. And again, there's some tools out there that allow you to do this. The other thing, the second point that you often get critique on is non-self-reported measure. People are very aware and conscious about the fact that they're in this experimental situation and might report things in the questionnaire that they think they should be reporting because they are in this artificial setting. So we increasingly try in the social sciences also to use non-self-reported measures, which should increase the internal validity of the experiment, because if people behave in a certain way according to their expectations in the experiment, they might actually that should affect data quality. So we get away with social desirability bias, for instance. I can only show this bias towards normatively correct answers if I'm aware of what I'm doing. Yeah? You fill in the questionnaire. No experiment bias in the sense of that the experimenter or any procedures might affect this. No consistency bias. You could actually easily do pre-post tests because you would be capturing something which is not conscious process really. And there's different types to do this. I'm going to click on this because there's so much else we want to talk about, I think. Observational measures. What we often do is nowadays is give people behavioral tasks after a stimulus. So for instance, and a student of mine did an experiment, and I'm coming back to you really, about veganism in the media. And she had conditions where veganism was portrayed as healthy or as portrayed as good because of health or ethics reasons, and as bad because, again, health and ethics, I think. I'm not quite sure what she did, but something along those lines. So different conditions for, and then people, after reading those things, reading those articles, and after the experiment was over, were brought into a room to wait to receive their incentives. And in the room, she had different snacks on the table. And some of those snacks were vegan and others weren't. And she was observing at that moment still the people to see whether those who read about the positive health effects of veganism were more or less likely to pick vegan food or non-vegan food. Right? In another case, we tried this in one of the experiments on the Central African Republic thing that we just looked at. We had people doing the entire questionnaire thing and the experiment, and they thought they were done and going outside. And then there was a possibility to sign a petition for, not related really to the conflict, but to help something in some kind of conflict. So there was a real booth standing there and people approaching in the university somewhere. The students then asked them to provide a signature for something related to the dependent variable, and then we were observing basically who actually did that and who didn't. Yeah? So you want to, it's quite interesting to do actually. You want to make sure that your participants are not aware of the fact that they're being observed. You give them behavioral tasks that they don't think are part of the experiment ideally, but you can observe very real behavior then afterwards. And they're not necessarily consciously adhering to the experimental thesis. Another thing we're doing is eye tracking sometimes now, when we show people different types of newspapers or movies, for instance. They're doing that in front of the screen and have special kinds of glasses on, and we can actually at every millisecond of the movie see where their eyes were going. And then if you do that with different movie clips, you can actually see where the difference in the movie clips caused something in the perception of those movies. Funky stuff, though, very weird data, so I'm not quite sure how useful it is always, but it's quite interesting, especially for marketing and advertising purposes, to see what actually attracts people's attention in an advertisement.
Social media also?
We haven't done this with social media yet. And I wouldn't... Yeah, it could be interesting to see what people are doing on their Facebook stream. What are people paying attention to and for how long, and what are they rather skipping, things like that. It's interesting methodology. It's very costly at the moment still. One of those things costs about 50,000 to 20,000 euros still. One of those glasses, because you need the software and so on and so forth. So it's very costly still at the moment, but yields some interesting results. Implicit measures. And here I want to show you the implicit association test in a second. So there are certain tests being developed that try to get at implicit reactions of people or implicit attitudes of people. So tests that don't require you to actually give an answer on a question in a questionnaire, but require you to do a certain task, and thereby we try to assess your implicit attitudes. And there are psychophysiological methods, which we get to in a second as well. I'm running a bit back and forth today. Let's try to do one of those implicit association tests just to show you that, show you what happens there. You can all do this. It's a Harvard website where this test was developed at some point, and you see they immediately know that we're in India when I click the link from here. And we can do such an IET. We give consent now. I wish to proceed. And let's take, what are we interested in terms of attitudes? Attitudes towards differently weighted people, fat versus thin people, male, females, different castes, which is interesting because caste, of course, never comes up when I do this in Europe. So that's the first time I see this actually. Race, country, sexuality, and so on and so forth. We'll just do weight. So can I ask you to do this test now? And we can all watch. So you should be minimally distracted, which won't work today. And should be watching this and blah blah blah. Click here to begin. Click to start. So, you're doing the fat-thin implicit association test, right? You will complete 3 tasks, 2 brief questionnaires, and an IET in which you set words and pictures to categories as quickly as possible. 10 minutes. We try to do. We're not doing the entire thing, so we're spending 4 or 5 minutes now on this, but it's interesting. When you finish, you will see the results as well as more information about the test and performance of others. So continue. You don't have to fill this in honestly. Just click anything, anything you want to, because since we're doing this all together. So they collect some initial this is just for their own research purposes that they collect this data, and I'm not sure. Okay. Thanks. Oh, I didn't know that there was 2 questions here, so quickly answer those as well. Sorry. You immediately see how what these web servers look like, right? That's a long one. Doing very well. Don't worry about the truthfulness of this as well. I hope that there will be So, in the next task, you will be presented with a set of words or images to classify into groups. This task requires that you classify items as quickly as you can while making as few mistakes as possible. Going too slow or making too many mistakes will result in an uninterpretable score. This part of the study will take about 5 minutes. The following is a list of category labels and the items that belong to each of the categories. So you get categories: good, bad, fat, or thin. And these categories are characterized by the words joy, love, peace, wonderful, pleasure, glorious, laughter, happy, agony, terrible, horrible, nasty, evil, awful, failure, hurt. And you get images of fat people in this category and of thin people in this category. Now the next thing is important for you to read back there. Keep your index fingers on the E and Y I keys to enable rapid response. Two labels at the top will tell you which words or images go with which theme. Each word or image has correct classification. Most of these are easy. The test, if no results, if you go slow, please try to go as fast as possible. If you make a mistake, are you ready to begin? Are you ready to begin? Then you put your index finger on E and Y, I. But you need also to click ready to begin. You're reading this?
I was.
Put the middle and this. So. Correct. You're slow. Go faster.
Okay.
Go faster. Go faster. Go faster. Very.
Okay.
This is just a test. See above, the categories have changed. Now you have to do it with love. Right? Very little words below. He's taking either left or right. Right? Doing well. Go ahead. Getting harder. Watch this for another probably 30 seconds to a minute, because then you get what it's all about. Don't make too many mistakes. It's cognitively quite demanding, isn't it? Okay. No?
Start over?
Yeah, go on. So now you basically get again how quick it is in terms of sorting the people into the right categories, right? You need to see different combinations of this. That's why I have you going on all the time. Clear that we clearly see we're in the United States because people affect their behavior. So, hang on. Oh, good, go ahead. Notice that these are reversed now. Yeah? Maybe stop here. Okay, just quickly. So what? No, just stop. Just stop. Let's leave it like this. Oh, no. Anyway, what happens here is that every click that he's doing, for every click that he's doing, the response time latency is recorded. So it is recorded in milliseconds how long it takes after seeing the picture to press the button, or after seeing the word to press the button. Yeah? For every click you've been doing now. Now we've got that data. And then we have, and that's the most important really, there's a lot of mathematics behind that now, but that's the most important. Then we have combinations of good fat on this side and bad thin on this side. And we have bad fat and good thin. And what is being done now is checking whether for you it's easier, i.e. you're quicker, sorting thin or fat people into the good or bad side depending on where the word stands. So if you have an implicit bias towards thin people, you should be slower in sorting the fat people into the good fat category, into the good fat community, because your implicit bias will be that fat is not good. So you would have a harder time doing this, which means it would take you more effort to do so, and that means more time. So by knowing for each of these iterations how long it takes to sort the pictures into the different combinations of different categories, the program at some point will actually come up with a score that would tell you whether you carry some sort of implicit prejudice, disliking towards fat people. If you do it with the same speed, if the fat people are sorted into good fat or bad fat with the same speed, then you're very unlikely to have any bias, and that's compared to all the other exercises. But if there is differences in the speed, to keep it very simple, it would show that there's a latent and implicit negative attitudinal bias towards fat people. I knew this took a while, but I think it's a fascinating methodology. This has been tried out for 20 years now. You saw very different aspects. Comes from racial studies and racial prejudice studies, but could be applied to various sorts of contexts. And it looks very hard, but essentially it's not that hard anymore to do yourself. No, I mean to make this as a study, to build this into your study. There's templates that allow you to program an IAT fairly efficiently, i.e. fairly easily, with whatever sort of things you want to be testing. I think there's a template that is free of cost. Harvard and Blizzard would also do it for you, but they need money. But I know a student of mine did it for a student project, and she used some sort of template that was free. I'm happy if you write me an email again, I can dig that out and send around. It requires a bit of wanting to do this type of stuff and dealing with data in some sort of way, but it can come up with really nice results that avoids conscious processing of answering a question. All the cognitive steps we talked about yesterday in answering a survey question are basically bypassed by doing this thing. Because you weren't aware of anything you were doing, right? You were trying your best to answer the questions, but you wouldn't be thinking about response time latencies in that case. And there's different types of IATs around, by the way. Read things by Greenwald, for instance, who developed this quite advanced. We did a study using an IAT on far-right party voting, because we assumed that people would be hesitant in surveys to say they were voting for an extreme right party, because it's normatively, especially in Germany, normatively not really something you would admit in public. So we looked at IAT results and built that into an experiment, actually. And it's actually just been published in Political Psychology, I think, which is nice, right? Yeah. So it can really be used for various different types of things, and fairly easy. And then you've got something which is called physiopsychological measures. Physiopsychology concerns the study of cognitive, emotional, and behavioral phenomena as related to and revealed through physiological principles and events. What is increasingly being done also in the social sciences is to measure people's heart rate when they're sitting in an experimental situation. So the horror movie study, for instance, that I've been referring to frequently now, they were actually measuring people's heart rates while they were watching a horror movie. And with heart rates, you tell you something about the attention, the effort, the arousal and emotion, different types of parasympathetic activities, interpretation just based on heart rate often difficult. You could look at breathing as well. Often what's being done is skin conductance studies, which requires you to have a little thing on your finger, and it every couple of times per second measures how much sweat is actually coming out of the finger. And you would think there's not a lot of variation in there, but if you look at it on the micro level, there is actually a lot of variation in there. So with that, you usually measure arousal types of things. How aroused do people get? What they're exposed to. Facial EMG things. So we know that certain muscle contractions in the face indicate certain emotional states, for instance, and we have a very hard time controlling these. So there's programs that would take a video caption of someone doing something, and then these muscle contractions are translated into data saying you something about emotional states of people. Also, there's a bit of cost involved, but we once did a study. It's a Face Reader is the program. It does cost you 500 euros per month or something to use, but you can show something to people. The camera would record people's face, and Face Reader would code the facial expressions, the muscle extractions, into 7 different emotional categories. So you would see whether people become happy by looking something, or angry, things like that. Again, there's quite a bit of commercial application out there, often for marketing purposes, developed for marketing purposes, but very suitable to use for other social science purposes as well, if you get to that. And then, first people in my field at least start to play around with fMRI studies. So that's where you put people in a tube and look at brain activity and activities of different brains in the tube while showing them certain types of stimuli. That's of course very, very, very expensive. I think like a participant in that machine costs you several thousand euros. And you don't buy the machine because the machine costs millions of euros, of course, and the software and all that. But getting access to this is very difficult. But there's a few people playing around with these in an experimental setting. So you show people different types of pictures, for instance, and you can see how their brain, how different regions of the brain would light up when they look at different types of pictures. External validity would probably become very low in this scenario. Just to give you a sense of what's happening out there, right? It's not all questionnaire stuff. I think, 90%, 95% of what I'm doing is questionnaire-based, and maybe more than 95% of what you'll be doing in the near future will be questionnaire-based. But especially with the implicit association stuff, for instance, there would be easy mechanisms to maybe go a bit beyond just questionnaire-based measures. I'll browse through this a bit. Vignette experiments. So we'll be looking at different types of experiments, because so far, it was all very classic experimental setups, 2 groups, 4 groups, you look what's happening. And there's some refinements of that, let's put it that way, that I quickly want you to see at least. And we might not have the time to very in-depth go into each one of these, but you've seen them, you maybe know by Googling the words then how to find more information and all that. Then vignette experiments. Vignettes are short, carefully constructed descriptions of a person, object, or a situation representing a systematic combination of characteristics. I almost leave it at